The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
Hooray for Hollywood, where stars are living large, in mansions with their servants and their credit cards in charge, with fame that's fleeting, but the egos never change, where everyone's a genius, except the ones who really arrange. Hooray for Hollywood, where the scandals always sell, where every whispered secret is a new tabloid's tell. Oh, how we adore the endless red carpet galore. Hooray for Hollywood, where less is always more.
You're damn right, less is always more. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. You are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast, Damn You Hollywood. And he gets up at 7, yeah, and he goes to work at 9. He's got no time for living, yeah, because he's working all the time. Seems to me he could live his life a lot better than he thinks he can. I guess that's why they call him. They call him the working man, yeah. And that's what he am. Ladies and gentlemen, the working man, Robert Winfrey. Yay!
You know, you accuse me of having provincial taste and then go with Rush.
There's provincial, and then there's obvious. Let's remember who each one of us are.
Fair enough. Hey, everybody. This is Damn You Hollywood. I'm Robert. That's Mark. We are going to be doing a Statler and Waldorf routine for this episode as we tackle the latest Jason Statham. You know, I can't quite call what he does a money laundering scam the same way Adam Sandler's career kind of turned into one of those.
Yeah,
the latest generic Statham flick.
Well, Jason Statham's movie career is not a Ponzi scheme the way, Happy Madison production company is.
Boy, ain't that the truth.
I would say the gimmick with Jason Statham is that eventually they're going to use AI and cloning so that he can, play each version of the last 5 movies he's been in as an Avengers team up.
Yeah, we've made that joke.
He'll be Levon. He'll be the beekeeper. He'll be, the what is it? The transporter.
He could be there's the transporter. There is the mechanic.
Yeah.
I think there's one other one that he did that's in this same vein that I can't remember off the top of my head.
And maybe you think that he should be led by his character from The Expendables?
You could.
I feel like one of these guys has to be kind of the Captain America of this operation.
It might be Lee Christmas, yeah, from The Expendables. That's definitely possible.
Yeah, when Radulich when No Pants Productions takes off as its own, movie producing studio, this is what we're going to work on: the all Jason Statham blue collar Avengers.
Okay, no. The one who actually calls all the shots is his character from Wrath of Man, the crime boss.
Fantastic. Well, what are we talking about tonight, Robert?
We're talking about a working man working hard with his hands.
A Working Man is a 2025 American action thriller.
Thrillers in there, yeah.
Yeah. Directed by, I like this, but thriller is a bit of a stretch. Directed by David Ayer, who co-wrote the script with Sylvester Stallone. The film is based on the 2014 Levon's Trade novel by Chuck Dixon, who is mostly known for his comic book writing, but he does have a series of books about this Levon's character, not just Levon's Trade.
Okay, here's how this worked out.
Mm-hmm.
In the aftermath of the first Taken movie, everybody and their dog did one of these, at least one.
Okay. It stars Jason Statham, Michael Peña, and David Harbour. It was released in the U.S. by Amazon MGM Studios under Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and internationally by Warner Brothers on March 20th. So This theoretically could have gone straight to Amazon, but they decided to go with a theatrical exhibition, which made me wonder, does Stallone have, like, because this isn't the first Stallone pick, and I didn't necessarily want to do a deep dive on this and throw you off, but it just kind of occurred to me as we're doing this. And when it's just me and you, we can actually talk like humans. I don't have to actually have a structured show. Does Stallone have like a first look deal with Amazon MGM?
I couldn't tell you one way or the other about that.
I would be curious. And I might when there's a breath between us, go look that up because if you'll remember, he did the one superhero movie that went straight to Amazon that we did.
Samaritan.
Yeah,
reviewed it.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm wondering how much of the other Stallone stuff has first priority with Amazon MGM.
Probably a fair bit. Wasn't Tulsa King an MGM or an Amazon Prime thing? I know that's where it is at the moment, but I don't know who produced it.
Well, it's actually, if I recall, Paramount.
Okay, because Paramount does most of their stuff. In theory, Paramount Plus exists, but most people who even have it just watch that stuff on Amazon Prime because it has Prime integration.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because I was listening to The Town the other day and they were talking about how basically Apple can't exist by itself. It now has a channel page through Amazon. So if you're watching Apple Plus content, television shows, movies, etc., you're watching it through Amazon. It's the only way anyone ever notices it, which I think is really funny.
Yeah, that's a thing. Amazon, it actually is one of the better things about Amazon Prime that they do just integrate all that other stuff. So it really is a useful stopping point to just be able to browse all of your other subscriptions.
So let's talk about the director of this, David Ayer, for a moment. You might know, if you don't know who David Ayer is, well, you should because you've seen most of his movies.
A lot, probably.
He wrote the Fast and the Furious from 2001.
And we do not forgive him for that.
He wrote, directed, and produced Harsh Times. He wrote, directed, and produced End of Watch, Sabotage, not the Beastie Boys song, Fury with Brad Pitt.
That's not the Beastie Boys song.
But probably the one that everyone remembers him for is that he wrote and directed Suicide Squad from 2016.
Allegedly.
Well, he wrote and directed it. What happened after that was completely out of his hands.
Because whatever got released was not really what he wanted to put out there.
Yeah. He directed and produced Bright, which I believe was a straight to Netflix movie.
And it's pretty terrible.
He wrote, directed, and produced The Tax Collector from 2020. And then most prior to this, he directed and produced The Beekeeper. He's probably his best credit to date. Like his biggest accolade is that he wrote Training Day, which Denzel Washington won an Oscar for.
He did. He's also involved, I can't remember if he wrote it or did some directing as well for Fury, the Brad Pitt World War II tank war drama.
Yeah, he wrote, directed, and produced that.
Yeah, so he's done a few good things, but here's kind of the problem with this movie, and here's where...
Hang on, before you get into this, yes, I'm so smart. I'm going to pat myself on the back. Sylvester Stallone's production company, Balboa Productions, signed a multi-year first-look deal with Amazon Studios in 2023. Under this agreement, Stallone will write, direct, produce, and star in both scripted and unscripted film and television products for Prime Video. This collaboration aims to bring Stallone's creative vision to Amazon's global audience. One of the projects developed under his partnership is the action thriller A Working Man, based on Chuck Dixon's Levon's Trade. He co-wrote the screenplay with David Ayer. Blah, 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 blah. The first look deal signifies a continued collaboration between Stallone and Amazon, leveraging Amazon's acquisition of MGM to develop and distribute new content. So, yeah, you're going to be seeing a lot more of Stallone shit in theaters and on Amazon in the near future.
Yeah, that tracks. So here's the thing about David Ayer. If you go through a lot of his movies, and I've seen a lot of them. I haven't seen all of them, but I've seen a lot. He has a real solid penchant for very gritty, dirty films.
Yeah, that is very evident in this movie. Let me tell you.
Here's the thing, though. It clashes with Stallone's sensibilities. There's a lot about this that has Stallone written all over it, and there's a lot about this movie that has David Ayer written all over it. And it's fairly obvious, like, which is which. And those two things never really blend. And it's kind of a problem this movie has. So, yeah, David Ayer, again, he's not a bad director. He's a little one note. I mean, The Beekeeper is actually a bit of a departure from him if you look at it being as stylized as it is.
The Beekeeper also had, I want you to give what I'm about to say a moment of thought before you knee-jerk react.
All right.
The Beekeeper had a filter, like a light kind of sheet of optimism to it. The Beekeeper, there seemed to be embedded in the theme and in the narrative of hope. There's none in this movie. I like this movie, and we'll talk about that. But all that hope, that optimism, that sense of there's good in the world if you dig enough for it, is not here in A Working Man.
Generally, no. And again, there's just a lot of his aesthetic and his sort of sensibilities that run afoul of Stallone. Stallone likes very stylized things.
I'll tell you.
By way of example.
Before you go into your example.
Okay.
If you're trying to figure out what the aesthetic of this movie is, imagine two guys lamenting the state of film, and they're having a beer, and they're just like, God, doesn't modern film suck? Of course it sucks. Have you seen the latest Snow White movie? My God, we are at peak suckness here. And if we don't get out of this death spiral, there'll be no more Hollywood left. Yeah, somebody should make a movie that gets us back to, that gets us back to good movies from people who like movies. We need gritty movies. He's like, yeah, you're right. We need gritty, manly movies. Yeah, man. We need to, and this is just building. We need movies that are just drowning in testosterone. Drowning. I practically want to shoot my testosterone all over your face. And this is, and finally they pass out drunk. And when they wake up, Santa Claus has left them a Working Man script in their hands. And they're like, we have to make this movie. But let's make it as literally dark as humanly possible. Like, let's not use lights at all in this movie. It's just natural lighting if there's any at all. And that's how we landed.
There's a few places I'm going to push back on that, but again, a few places, but I don't think you're wrong.
They were. This is almost the joke half idea that Dorian and I had about making a movie that is purposely against current motifs in movies, to the point where you kind of lose sense of what it is you're doing, and now you're just being anti whatever the now is. That's kind of how this felt to me. It's probably why I like it as much as I do.
Well, again, kind of by way of example, there is a biker club in this movie, the leader of which sits on a throne of motorcycle mufflers. This is not a David Ayer conceit. That is a, like, Sylvester Stallone went, okay, what do I think is cool? And he visualized that, I would guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and again, you go from this like slightly rundown honky-tonk exterior of this place through a tunnel into Sylvester Stallone's brain, where this meth-dealing biker gang's leader sits on a throne of mufflers, like the throne of swords from Game of Thrones. Like, that's kind of what we're dealing with here, and that's the dichotomy of vision at play, and it really is an issue for this movie for me.
All right, let's get into the plot of this thing. And there isn't a whole lot here, so this shouldn't go very long, and I'm not going to interrupt you.
So we open following a hobo.
Hang on. So if you don't do any tangents or go into any political speeches or bang a shoe, we should get through this quickly, yeah?
One of these days I'm going to have a shoe on hand and just visually for the gag, but I don't at the moment, so you're in good luck.
Make it a nice shoe.
No.
Come on,
it'll be the worst one I have.
You don't think Khrushchev wore nice shoes to the UN?
I don't think we deserve nice things.
Move on.
So we open by following kind of a hobo, Jason Statham, living in his truck. He is a foreman of sorts for a construction project.
I'm sorry, I can't stop myself. Nothing beats the hobo life, stabbing folks with my hobo knife. Keep going.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I knew you would because you know the reference.
So he is again a foreman on one of these construction project for a nice family with Michael Peña, because he is in every David Ayer movie pretty much. There's got to be Michael Peña in there somewhere. One of his workers is accosted by some thugs, so he beats them up and scares them off with a shotgun, so we can establish that he is capable and a scary man. We then get to meet the nice family that owns this whole operation. There's Michael Peña, there's his wife, there's his daughter, and something bad's going to happen to one of them, because that's how these things go. He then goes to spend some visitation time with his daughter. More on this later. Who is staying with her grandfather, the father of his late wife, who is hosting a Alice in Wonderland party for some godforsaken reason.
Because parties are fun. And girls like Alice in Wonderland, this isn't that difficult a concept, you alien.
Not a lot of girls at that party, all I'm saying.
Okay, it was a 30-second scene. It was mostly focused on the men. Keep going.
So this is some character establishment. I will yell about Alice in Wonderland parties later if you feel so inclined.
Super. Can't wait.
I imagine you attended more than one, and
I've actually
not anymore.
Hang on,
Let me phrase it that way.
I have been to the same Alice in Wonderland alcohol event. I took two different people.
And I imagine you will never go to another one.
I mean, I like to party.
No, you like to drink.
All right. I like when, like a girl, you have to tell me about myself. Keep going.
Tell me I'm wrong and I'll stop.
I probably won't do that one, but these events where there's like signature drinks and some sort of a theme are very fun to go to. I've been to at least one or two pirate ones, and the same Alice in Wonderland one, because one was someone's birthday and one I had to take my ex-wife to. So these are things that I do. They are a lot of fun for people who like to go out and do fun things.
They're a lot of fun for people who think Alice in Wonderland is aspirational. And
you know what the fun thing about that Alice in Wonderland event was? Like how much, because it was basically, because it wasn't the entire Alice in Wonderland thing. It was the Mad Hatter's Tea Party.
Yeah.
But it was like the Mad Hatter's Tea Party that was the love child of college theater people. And
that tracks.
Like craft drink bartenders.
That again, it is a union made in hell that serves up nothing but misery.
We had a nice time. Please continue.
And attracts the worst dregs of society.
They were
that can afford to go.
Mostly middle to upper class women there, psychopath.
But I repeat myself.
Okay.
All childless, probably single.
The woman's birthday who I attended had a child. Two of them, as a matter of
fact. Okay, for certain value of all. Majority. Let me say, vast majority.
I don't want to keep fighting you, and you keep talking.
So this Diddy party is going on at this doctor's house. It's the other reason I don't like the Alice in Wonderland parties. Like, I get serious pedophile vibes from everyone who goes to those.
And now we get to the meat of the matter. This is yet one of your 50 fucking triggers that have to be worked out on this show. Just keep going.
Little bit. The long and the short of all this is the daughter from the family that kind of gave Jason Statham his rebound after he left the military gets abducted by a woman who tattooed her forehead. That is a David Ayer conceit. Okay. So she gets abducted, and because nobody takes kidnapping seriously in the United States, pause and blink while we all understand how much that is not true. the family turns to Jason Statham and goes, "Can you please find our daughter?" And he goes, "I'm not that guy anymore." Then he goes to see blind David Harbour, who lives in the woods deliberately with his wife, who says, "No, you're good. We both know you're going to do it." Then he goes back and says, "I'm that guy again." And he starts investigating, and he finds a bartender who deals drugs, and he waterboards him. Then he shoots a couple of people who are there to pay him off. He then tracks some low-level Russians from the Vodizakonya, drowns one of them in a pool. That's one from the trailer. And he's basically kind of declared war on the Russian mob. Interspersed with this is a little bit of the people who abducted our victim, Jenny, from the block. Sorry. Tick for if you're about my age. And what she's kind of sort of going through, and she is like sold to this guy who I'm going to refer to as the Penguin, because if you watch the original Adam West Batman, he is dressed like that character in our final sequence, right down to the top hat and the cigarette holder. All he was missing was going every time he stepped.
He also didn't have a monocle.
I'm pretty sure he did, and they took it out. Look at that guy and tell me he wouldn't.
That actor kept pulling it out, and David Ayer was like, "Give me that! You can't have a monocle. What are you, crazy?"
You are not Burgess Meredith. So she is sold to that guy, but they do a bad job drugging her. Worst human traffickers ever, and she like bites his face, like tears a good chunk of it. Jason Statham, meanwhile, meets up with some people to try and get a drug deal going so he can look higher up into the mob. He does meet the higher up mobster, and then nothing comes of it. He gets attacked while staking out one of their locations, hit by a cop car. The cops are in on it, of course. He fights his way out, kills a couple of Russian younger, when I say young men, I mean like 20s, in the worst tracksuits imaginable. Pushes their van into a river, the world's deepest river, right off the bank. Just nose down, sinks all the way instead of like running aground as you probably would. He then goes to confront the guy that he first attacked, the guy that he knows is kind of behind this, but that guy's already been confronted by other elements of the mob. Meanwhile, Jenny almost escapes. She's tracked down. They go to kill her, but the guy who she bit says, no, I wish to exact vengeance in my own special way because I am a rich white man, balding with a ponytail. I'm pulling a Paul Heyman, and boy, is it not going my way. And I have to be the worst thing in this movie. So they drag her to this gathering. Jason Statham is pointed at the gathering. Carnage erupts. The biker gang shows up because Stallone wanted them to. And we need a higher body count. Again, a Stallone conceit. Jason Statham murders a bunch of people. They escape. And she goes back to her family. He reconnects with his daughter, who he put in protective custody after the Russian mob burned down his father-in-law's house and almost killed him. Jason Statham saved him. So their relationship can begin healing because you got to be careful with male therapists, especially one that wear clown wigs and noses and host Alice in Wonderland parties like this guy. I mean, for God's sake, there's a line where he says after being saved, the kid reminds him that, Jason Statham saved you.
That kid had the best line in this entire movie. I was waiting for you to shut up for me to say that. But yes, the daughter going to him, Grandpa, he could have just let you die. And I fucking laughed out loud.
And his response being, okay, I can acknowledge that, like we're in a therapy session. Anyway, he reconnects with his daughter and goes to live in the woods deliberately with David Harbour because now he's back, brother. And that's it. That's the movie.
Okay. I like this movie for the same reasons I like Hot Frosty. And and I gave it a 1 on my 3-point scale. So far, this and Companion are my 2 favorite movies of this year.
You know what? I am not going to critique your taste.
I think this excels at being exactly what it was meant to be. Number 1. Number 2, I appreciate the slow, gritty aesthetic that this movie is going for, and I think it accomplished well, and I think it pretty much pulled off. I understand that this is not going to be everyone's thing. It might move too slow for some people. It might be too dark for some people, and I mean like physically dark, literally dark. That they need their action to be even more stylized than this, to be even more punchier than this, and I don't mean like in the physical pun sense. I mean like more in the Fast and the Furious 7 through wherever we're up to sense. Like, they want their action movies to resemble more superhero movies than they do action movies. They don't necessarily need superheroes. They don't need powers, but they like extravagant action. Then this movie's not going to work for you. It does work for me. I actually was at my thought when the movie ended was, this is what Last Blood should have been. Like, instead of the weird running through the tunnel. I mean, like, we both gave Last Blood, good reviews, but I think this is a better version of what Last Blood was going for. If you're going to do kind of an editorial, a kind of on the nose editorial that human trafficking is bad, and you want, and it's a revenge fantasy against the concept of human traffickers, I think this pulled it off better in a more grounded way than Last Blood did. And we did, and if you'll remember, I haven't re-listened to it, so I was prepared for this trial to necessarily back that up. But what I remember of our review was we had some problems with it. There were definitely some issues with the craft that I think this one does a better job of fixing from the mistakes of Last Blood. That being said, Jason Statham is always a solid lead. What they give him to do here feels gritty, grounded, halfway realistic. He's not a Superman. He's just a trained military killer in a situation where most of the guys are not as good at the stuff he does as he is.
Okay. He gets to mow down stormtroopers because nobody in this movie can hit the broadside of a barn except him. And
well,
it's
sure.
More than a little ridiculous.
There's an element of fantasy here, or there's no movie. Let's not go crazy. I didn't say it was a documentary. I said in a fantasy, in the genre of revenge kill action movies, this one gets as close to something that resembles realism as these movies are ever going to get. Without relying entirely on like John Wicky gung fu type stuff.
I'm still going to disagree with that, but
okay. That being said, like I like that they gave the girl shit to do, that she wasn't just a damsel in distress. The biting of the guy. I mean, it's a little hackneyed and forced, but it was a way to not make her. It corrects a lot of the problems of modern fiction that everyone's complaining about without just complaining. Like, oh, there's too many girl bosses. Okay, so what's the right way to do girl with agency? The way they did it here. Yes, she's a damsel in distress. Yes, she's somebody for Jason Statham to chase after, but she's in situations where she's got a shot at defending herself. She does. In situations where she can be physical, she does, and she gets to kill somebody at the end and kill someone in a way that was at least halfway believable. She doesn't take out a 6'5" guy who bumps for her like fucking Rey Mysterio. She chokes out the other girl in the movie. As if like,
I could go with, here's the thing. I'd be happy to go with that if that wasn't a studio note that we can't have Jason Statham kill a woman.
He's just a common man working hard with his hands. He's just a common man working hard for the man. He's American dream. Dusty, greater than Jason Statham. Thank you, Jason.
The box office returns don't support that, but we'll leave that alone.
Anyway, there's some pacing issues with this movie. You talked about it when we first started. This thing, I think, for it to have been more successful and a little bit more snappier and retain the attention of people who maybe like a little bit more punch in their action, getting this down to 90 minutes would have been better. The way they have it, I think one of the things that I also liked about it, which a lot of people might not if they're not into this sort of thing, is that this kind of takes elements of like hard-boiled noir detective and kind of mashes it with revenge action kill story, and and a little bit of one man versus the mob action foo. So it's a lot. There's a lot of things all in the same ballpark happening at once. So going back to the thing that I liked about it, I like the fact that you actually have it isn't Jason Statham just runs into one bar after another, killing as many people as he can until the final boss presents himself, and says, "Do you smell what the Rock is cooking?" Instead, he actually has to figure shit out. There's a lot of time. There's a lot of time dedicated to him buying weight in order to work his way up to higher ups in the mob.
Yeah, which can I tell you, in general,
that stuff would have been handled better if this was a series and not a movie.
Yeah, there's a few things going on there with that.
Mm.
I'm with you that I like that he has to actually investigate. I'm 1,000,000% with you. It's a nice thing that they did. I appreciated it deeply. On the flip side, this movie loses momentum. The story meanders a fair bit through the middle.
But I'll tell you why that is. There are no other places to cut to. There's only so much they can do with the girl. The villains are not all that interesting, and cutting to them would be kind of a waste. So you only have one POV character to deal with, and that's Jason Statham. So a movie with more perspectives, where they deal a little bit more with if we had actually gotten more involved with the higher ups in the Russian mob, and that's what we were cutting to, and there was more stuff happening with the girl, this would have flowed a little bit better. Instead, they have to focus a lot of the movie on Jason Statham, and you're right, him kind of working through math in his car, after he's done a bit of investigating, was fun for me to watch because I like that sort of thing. But it's not going to capture a lot of people's attention.
And then it's again, there's always a little bit of the question, well, why make this choice? Why does he choose to become an undercover DEA agent, basically, for a 40-minute stretch of the movie? It's a weird choice for him to take that investigative route. It's a weird choice for his character, and it's a weird choice narratively. There's other ways to go about that, and
I'd be curious to see how much of the novel is dedicated to that, because the original. It's not called the books are not called A Working Man. They're called Levon's Trade, which can be a play on the fact that he's a construction worker, but it can also a play on the fact that he was a Royal Marine or whatever the fuck he actually is in the book, because they had to change it because Jason Statham's British.
True.
So I haven't ChatGPT'd how much of the movie resembles the book or not, but I think if I had to hazard a guess, and I'll let you weigh in here, and then maybe I will. I'm wondering if that's a big part of the book, is that he has, from his prior service, a certain amount of investigative skill that he has to now lean back on in order to find this girl. That he can't just, commando style tear through the underground. Which again is something that I like and is a little bit different than the normal stuff. I think that's why.
Hang on,
I'm as attracted to this movie as I am.
My point is not that I needed him to go full commando. That's ridiculous. Which isn't always a bad thing, but it's ridiculous. My question is does infiltrating a biker gang and then posing as a meth distributor is that really the best way to go about getting what he's after? There's other investigative angles you could take that might not have slowed the momentum of the narrative quite as much as that one did. Because then he's got to have a fight scene. And then, oh no, the security broad is one of the women who is one of the abductors. And you wind up in this weird spot where our characters are the narrative arcs of our characters are kind of just circling each other without seeming like they're making any progress. Because then, he gets to meet the guy he's after. He only meets the guy he's after and doesn't do anything, so that later that he can identify him, so we can get the scene where he tries to burn down his father-in-law's house. There's a bunch of stuff here that only happens so another scene can happen, rather than something that necessarily feels all that organic. And this is all compounded by, again, the mishmash of David Ayer liking things dark and dirty and Stallone liking things stylized. So you get stuff like a biker gang that rolls up to our final shootout, half of them wearing samurai helmets and almost wearing Mad Max gear. And our two big Russian heavy guys that are assisted, I mean, I don't mean heavy literally, I mean the heavy hitters, who are assigned to assist in sorting this out, look like somebody fed a John Wick style into Eurotrash vision, and it was spat out by an AI image generator.
So I'll skip down to this last little bit here. I will tell you that in the book, he's a black ops government operative, according to ChatGPT.
Sure, because look, he's a Jack Reacher knockoff. Fair enough.
The book Levon's Trade is not as heavy on investigation as the film A Working Man. The novel is more direct and action-driven, in line with Chuck Dixon's background as a comic book writer. Here's how they differ. In the movie, the plot unfolds like a slow-burn detective story. Again, why I like it. Levon spends time gathering clues, following leads, and working with allies like Gunny to track down the missing girl. There's more emphasis on urban crime elements and unraveling a conspiracy. In the book, Levon gets involved in the situation more immediately and personally. There's less procedural detective work. His methods are faster, more brutal, and focused on getting results than playing detective. It's closer to a revenge thriller than a mystery or a noir.
Well, again, I don't mind the investigative tack that this takes. In fact, I think the best versions of this story, because let's be clear, again, this is a riff on Taken. Taken.
Mm-hmm. You know, I've never seen Taken. You reference it a lot, and I've never seen. Yeah, I wanted to eventually do a Long Road to Ruin on it, and
then you stopped doing Long Road to Ruin.
I was gonna say, and then that podcast fell apart.
Tell you what, if you want to revive it for a one-off, I'll do it with you. But you should at least.
I still do it occasionally, as occasionally as I can depend on certain people to make the podcast and be prepared for it. But to get to your offer, yeah, sure, I'd love to do a Long Road to Ruin on Taken with you.
But again, the first one was this kind of big sleeper success, and it revitalized Liam Neeson's career as a bit more of an action hero. And that one has a lot of investigative work. And it's one of the better things about it. So at least watch the first one, then get back to me on where you think it rates relative to this one, because I find that one to be much more kind of what I want out of this style of story than I got out of this one. Here's a couple of other problems I have with this movie, and some of this is editing. I'll be very clear about
when you're done, I have one question I want to ask you, and then I think I'm done, because the only thing
I want to say. Go ahead and ask, and my thing will wait.
So I think I've done a decent job of explaining why I like this movie. I think I recognize that this is a deeply personal, not like my experience as a person in the military or going after some girl or whatever. This relates to the question I'm going to ask you. We've watched so much Drek in 3 months. There's so much blah and meh that we've had to cover, not the least of which was last week, which I never want to talk about again.
Did you, in that vein, did you see Echo Chamberlain's newest video? Because you turned me on to him, so he comes up in my feed every now and then. I have to decide, do I want to watch this one? Do I not? But his thing on Hollywood slop.
Yeah, I watched it today. It was great.
It really is. It speaks to a lot of that.
He's great, isn't he, Echo Chamberlain?
Not everything he does, but I don't mind his stuff coming across. I don't mind some of his stuff.
He's pissed my son off on more than one occasion, and my daughter for that matter. But
one of those doesn't surprise me.
Anyway, yes, I saw his video on Hollywood slop, but I think because I've had to swallow so much slop so far that in just a 3-month period of time, given the online stuff I've had to review plus stuff we do, that this is my second favorite movie of this year behind Companion, because everything else is just serviceable or sucks. So
it benefits by comparison.
So that's my question to you.
Okay.
Are you with me in that, just given the stuff that we've talked about this year, because I don't know what weirdo shit you watch when I'm not around. So just the stuff we've covered, is this not at least the second? It's not better than Companion. So far, nothing is. But this is at least the second best movie we've seen this year. It's tough, right? Because I'm counting Nosferatu for last year.
Yeah, I know. And I'm thinking.
Yeah.
It's second or third, but this is mostly a damning indictment of everything we've watched. And
that's kind of what I'm saying, Robert.
Hang on.
This has not been a great year.
So allow me to just very briefly kind of explain why you and I are approaching this a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been in this position where I think most of what I watch is crap for a little bit longer than you, my standards have not sunk. I'm not giving this thing a lot of benefit simply because of comparison. Is this better than pretty much that? Is this better than most of what we've reviewed this year? Yeah, not by much, but yeah.
This is currently in my top 10. By December, if it's still in my top 10, two things. One, I might quit this podcast. Two, that is a damning indictment of the film industry that nothing could get past. Nothing was better than Companion and A Working Man. Really? With everything that we're going to talk about this year, nothing was better than those two movies? That's sad.
Yeah, so look, as I've said before, I don't have a top 10. I sort of like keep a loose list going.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not on my best movie so far this year. It's not on my list for that. And if I wind up filling in spaces down the stretch, I desperately need to fill in spots, 7, 8, 9, and 10. It might creep in somewhere in there, but this is not like my first choice for anything.
You know what it kind of reminds me of, and you're going to hear this and be like, that's ridiculous. I don't know why I do this podcast with you, but I'm going to say it anyway. Because, when it's just me and you and I don't poke you occasionally with a fork, what are we doing here? This kind of feels like a dumb Chinatown. Like, if someone were to say, I want to remake Chinatown, but I'm 20 in the year 2025.
That's a little bit like claiming that. Hang on. I'm trying to find an appropriate comparison here for you.
Okay.
Because I'm not wholly. I see where you're coming from. Okay. I don't think you're way off in left field, but that's a little bit like saying that any generic haunted house movie is like a dumb version of The Shining.
That's kind of what I am saying.
Hang on. It's not untrue, but it's almost too abstracted to be useful.
I guess, when you think about like Chinatown, that was many things, not the least of which was a damning indictment of I think the water companies and power and all of that. Like there was an overarching thing as well as the hard-boiled noir stuff. And it was like somebody watched Chinatown and only got the hard-boiled noir stuff and wanted to update it. That's why I'm making the comparison.
Okay, again, my take on this was, again, someone saw Taken and went, okay, but what if we did a British guy set in the United States instead of an American going to Europe?
Okay, so we both have deconstructionist reductive takes on this movie, just different
a
ones.
Little bit, yeah. Okay, so
yeah, go ahead.
my big problems with this movie. One of these has to do with, again, it's how this thing is edited together, because when I talk about pacing and how the movie meanders, there is no sense of time in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's one of the big problems I have with it.
Well, he never changes his clothing, so it feels like this is a 24-hour period.
He never changes. Well, he gets into the suit at one point. Yeah. And there's a couple of different night scenes, so at least a day has passed, but time loses meaning here. And that's a real mistake in this kind of a story, because the ticking clock is a giant element of what makes them work. You have X amount of time from abduction to we're done. Whatever you do has to be done in that time period, and that ticking clock is what drives the pace, it's what drives the action, it's what drives the motivation. When you remove that to these two chuckleheads are going to bumble around with this girl until the cows come home because the story says so, while we come up with contrivance for her not to be dead or sold off after 4 hours, I'm sorry, you lose me more than a little bit.
Yeah, it was my only sticking point, and I kind of just overlooked it. But it was definitely something that stuck in my craw about how is she... You have to find her. There has to be a happy ending here. So there has to be a delay, or there has to be some sort of stupid, as you put it, contrivance as to why she's still around. The reality is she'd be so far gone out of this country or so far underground, they'd have never found her again.
So again, let me reference Taken. The reason his daughter is not obliterated is because the people who kidnap her discover she's a virgin, which means she's worth more. So instead of dumping her for a cheap price to what did the Japanese soldiers call them? Pleasure camps, when they, just look up the mass rape by Japanese soldiers in World War II. It is the stuff of nightmares. But instead of dumping her on one of those things because she's more valuable, they put her in an auction. That takes more time, gets more bidders involved, gets, disgusting people involved in bidding on that kind of thing. So it buys you a little bit more time. And it's a plausible explanation about why a victim of this kind of thing would not immediately just be gone. And there's other things. Again, Taken's actually a really good movie. So when you watch that, I think you'll enjoy it. But there is no such conceit here. There is scumbag who wants the girl, who is in the country, who is in the area, and for some reason it takes us like 3 days to get them to meet. And then she attacks him, and she's not immediately killed as a liability. Then she escapes, and instead of simply shooting her when they find her, they drag her to the farmhouse, prepare to shoot her, only to be stopped at the last minute by, again, the Penguin, going, "No, I'd still like to kill her myself, and I'll pay you more money." And again, you see the hand of the author, and it's really annoying.
It's so funny. As I listen to you speak, and it gets my mind going in different directions, I find myself laughing at the idea that the most realistic portrayal of criminals in this sort of endeavor is nude nuns with big guns. I'm thinking specifically of the gas station rape scene.
I know what you were thinking of.
Okay.
So that, again, that's just a problem for me. It disrupts the movie. The lack of time, it's all a big problem. There are good things too. Like I said, I actually like that he investigates instead of just guns blazing. I think that's a smart decision that they made.
Mm-hmm.
I wish they'd paid it off better, but again, David Ayer and Sylvester Stallone have some competing visions here. The biker gang shows up for the big shootout because Stallone thinks it's cooler to have a big shootout in your finale. And so we get a little Mad Max thrown in here with our costuming and the bikes driving through the windows and all that stuff. As you mentioned, Statham's a good lead. He's more than capable of handling himself in the fight scenes and the gunplay. Like, he's good at that. But even the end of this is kind of anticlimactic.
Well, I think, he's doing the John Rambo thing. I specifically said his whole name because it's a character, not a movie thing.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
So the thing that everyone remembers John Rambo from First Blood Part 2, as being muscly, tank top, running through the jungle with a machine gun, making retard face, making out with Vietnamese women. Okay, that's an element of Rambo, not the whole character. The whole character of Rambo you meet in the first one, and he kind of comes back by the end of the series, which is this guy who is traumatized.
Oh, hang on. The best. There are only 2 really good movies in the Rambo series.
Mm-hmm.
There's First Blood, and there's Rambo, which is the 4th.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So what people don't realize, unless you've studied the stuff like we have, and I did an entire Long Road to Ruin where I discussed this, is what makes Rambo Rambo is he's coming out of that era of filmmaking where we were dealing with the traumatized Vietnam War soldier coming home. And the weight of, they're not only carrying the weight of being a soldier in a theater of war, but the fact that they felt like the government betrayed them every which way they could betray them. And then their country betrays them. And so they're kind of, I was trained to do a thing. I did the best job with it I could. The rug was pulled out from me. And when I came home, everyone hated me for it. Why? Why is this happening to me? And they have to live with that. They carry that for, however long for the rest of their lives, each individual person does. And how well they carry it is dependent on individual resiliency. Rambo carries it poorly. He's having some real struggles. And a lot of what makes Rambo is that he doesn't necessarily want to go back to being the, warrior killing machine. But he gets kind of pigeonholed into that's all anyone ever sees him as. So that's all he can ever do to prove any kind of value. And it's also how he gets out of some of the jams that he's in. And he doesn't, and it's an internal struggle that he has. It's one of the elements that people seem to miss about Rambo is how much he wrestled with not wanting to be a killing machine, but feeling like that was all he was ever good at. So here we have Jason Statham doing a riff on that of, it's why they introduced the David Harbour character. Though David Harbour is, I think, like the worst thing about this movie, and not because he does a bad job acting. It's just his dialogue reading was so fucking mumblefuck. I couldn't understand a word he was saying. And I got the gist of it, but I missed a lot of that.
That's
dialogue.
For the record, I think that's a you problem. I had no problem with it.
I missed a lot of it,
which is fine. Like I'm simply providing a minor counterpoint there because I'm not sure how objective that criticism is. That said, I don't think you're making it up just to make it up. Okay. So
no, I was trying, and I got the gist of it because I caught a couple of words here and there, and I got the reflection of what Jason Statham was doing. And then at the end, when he finally speaks up a little bit more, he was just, he's like, "You don't need my permission," that kind of a thing. Like, all right, I got what the purpose of his character is, but clearly Jason Statham. His character in this is struggling with the person he used to be and doesn't want to be that person anymore, and he flat out fucking says it. And then it's tied to whatever happened to the David Harbour character. And then he was like, okay, I don't want to go back on my word to you-ish, but this is important. This girl is in danger, and I can do something about it. And isn't that what we're all about, is doing the right thing for the right people? And so he does. And again, that's a riff on the Rambo character. And I think Jason Statham, this whole bit has been about, I think Jason Statham does a really good riff on Rambo.
I think Statham as an actor has the capability of riffing on Rambo quite well. I think the movie and the writing does him no favors in that respect when it comes to this movie in particular. There's barely lip service given to the notion of, who I used to be. There's a couple of lingering, like David Ayer shots of him looking at his hands, and sometimes they're clean and sometimes they're bloody, but it never goes anywhere. And again, this is where you can see the fractured vision for this story, for this movie. I think Ayer wanted a more character-focused film. And I don't think he got it. Again, it's there, but it's almost, if you were to just read the script, it would read like a cardboard cutout. Statham's acting gives it a little bit of depth, so it's not grating.
Be curious to see if Ayer and Stallone were at loggerheads on this, and that's
here's the thing. Here's my hunch about this. I don't think they were.
Mm-hmm.
When I say they're at crossed purposes, I don't think they butted heads. I think they thought their meshed vision would work better than this did, which happens all the time too. By the way, like we're used to talking about the stories of this one.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just think hey, this will work, and the process is fine, and the end result is just not great. That's a not uncommon thing either.
Well, it's funny because you can collaborate with somebody and then be open to collaboration, and it's something that we talk about all the time. Is we wish there was more collaboration and less, one singular vision, because I think the former tends to be better than the latter. But even in collaboration, you have to give up some of your wants and needs, some of your baby, in order to allow for your collaborator to get some of his stuff in there. And sometimes in the benefit of giving somebody their part of the collaboration and giving up your own stuff, you're making not great decisions. But how would you know that at the time?
Yeah, so again, this is one of those things where I doubt there was a lot of major friction, but these are just they're just two visions of these guys that just I don't think blend.
Right. And the other side of that is Stallone. People love Tulsa King. Stallone.
I haven't seen it yet.
Pat raved about it, and Pat's usually a good judge of what's and Tulsa King had, beyond Pat Mullen, has had, I believe, good reviews. Like it got renewed for a second season. A lot of this, for as much crap as Stallone gets for his acting and some of the weird movies that he's been in, which was Oscar, like a lot of stuff Stallone touches.
Oscar's actually funny.
A lot of stuff that Stallone touches is good. So if you're David Ayer and you're working with a legend like Stallone, who generally has more hits than misses, you're going to trust him. And David Ayer may have given up some things that he was thinking would make this movie better in favor of giving Stallone what he thought would work better. And why wouldn't you listen to a guy who has more hits than misses?
Yeah. So again, this didn't feel like it really came together as far as, like, again, slightly conflicted visions of how this was going to work out. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I saw this with my mom. And she hated the costume choices for most of these characters. Again, like, you get the Mad Max vibe from the biker club for no good reason.
So what she's really talking about is the two Russians with the weird, with the loud, ridiculous jumpsuits. Yeah.
No. Not just those two. Again, the two heavies that show up look kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of like production stuff here that you can kind of see what they're going for. Again, we're kind of riffing on John Wick's stylization and the ability to just, like, one of the nice things about the John Wick franchise, you can look at any of those characters. They don't have to say a word. They are visually designed well enough to convey the majority even of their character before they speak. And not quite hitting the mark.
All right. We're almost at an hour. Anything else?
Yeah, just I gotta hash this out real fast. So they drop the line that Statham's wife killed herself, and then we do nothing with that.
Okay, I don't want to necessarily get into an argument, but it's not worth it. But that line is there, and I'm sure you already know this, but I'm saying this for the audience's benefit. They have to give a reason for there to be that much tension between the maternal father and between the maternal grandfather and Jason Statham. So her killing herself only serves that purpose. Could they have done more with it and fleshed that out a little bit more and done more with it for this movie? Sure. I don't know if the audience would have liked it or tolerated it. And since all you needed for is a reason for the grandfather to hate Jason Statham, it served its purpose.
I get that it serves the purpose, but that's a very specific thing. And that carries a lot of baggage with it.
Not a lot of choices here, Robert. She can either die of cancer, she can kill herself, or Jason Statham could have accidentally manslaughtered her.
Here's what I would do. Okay, if I'm writing this to make this easier. It's cancer, and he wasn't there when she died because he was deployed. And the resentment comes from him not being there for the death of this guy's daughter. And her asking, like, you can play with that.
So if you pitch that to me, if I'm Stallone, I'm going, fuck, does every woman die of cancer in these movies? Can't we do something different? And this was something different. I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm not really arguing that's how I feel like that conversation went.
There's a decent chance, but my counter argument is if you go with suicide, that's okay.
Here's what I would have done. She went to go visit him on deployment. Like he was off mission, and she went there, and the base got attacked.
Okay, yeah. There's a lot. Point being, there's a lot of ways you could do this. Suicide in particular, like that's not just dead. That's not even just cancer dead, which is tragic, but a lot of people die of cancer. Suicide is like big, giant, flashing red button. And if the closest you get to addressing the big, giant flashing, the big neon sign flashing in the background is one scene where the daughter goes, "I'm kind of mad at her." And Jason Statham just goes, "Yeah, me too, kid."
So here's what I'll say about that, and then we're going to move on. I'm wondering how much there was that they shot more of. It's kind of like Ripley's daughter in Aliens.
Yeah.
They just cut it.
because there's this entire, again, kind of throughout this movie, there's this subplot that you can tell somebody really liked, at least in the writing phase, of his relationship with his daughter.
Yeah.
And how that's like kind of trying to ground this guy who might otherwise have flown completely off the handle. And whatever their idea was, they decided 80% of this has to go in service of not having this be a 2.5-hour movie, which thank you.
Well, that's the thing. That's why I compared it to Ripley's Daughter, because Sean and I got into a not like a contentious, like we were mad at each other, but like we could not have been more polar opposites. When we talked Aliens years ago on Long Road to Ruin, I was saying they should have left the Ripley's Daughter stuff in. His argument to me was, for what purpose? Who watching this movie would have given two shits and a fuck?
Well, Sigourney Weaver, for one.
I said watching. But that was
okay, hang on.
But you're now putting me in the position of now defending his argument, which I was against to begin with. But that was his argument. No one's going to care enough about this subplot that, so why not take it out of the movie and get to shooting the aliens already? Same thing here.
Well, allow me to express why I think it's different a little bit here. Ripley's Daughter's subplot is important to that movie because it grounds the emotion of her attaching to Newt. I just want
to be clear. I made that argument.
I know. I'm not relitigating that argument. Okay. I'm talking about this one. Jason Statham's character here has the emotional bit of being attached to the family whose daughter is kidnapped. I don't need his daughter. Like, her entire thing could have been removed. Or it needed to be greatly expanded. And
I'm wondering why they needed to have a contentious relationship with the grandfather at all. To be honest,
that too. I don't know.
Now that you've said that, like, why couldn't he? It's just there's just nothing there. He watches the daughter because he has no place to live.
Okay,
and the relationship is: are you ever going to get your shit together, man?
Which that could have been better. That could have been a perfectly valid argument, but instead, again, there's bitterness and anger, and I feel like it's written the way it's written because either Stallone or Ayer wanted to take a shot at male therapists. Because listen to how that guy talks.
That is entirely possible. And
it's nothing. Look,
acknowledge is a perfectly good word. Thank you very much.
I'll acknowledge that.
That was
not.
That was how Melissa and I used to end arguments. One of us would go, heard, acknowledge, and that was the sign of shut up.
Okay, but that's also not how I would express myself after being dragged from a burning building by a man.
Okay, fair.
Like, that guy does nothing but use therapy speak in his communication, and God, it's annoying, and I'm fine with taking shots at the fact that how many people are written, but it feels like that's the only reason that character's there, I feel like that's the only reason we have that relationship, and there's a lot of stuff in here that just feels like ideas or scenes or interactions that they just stitched together via the loosest connective tissue. And I can't really get behind that as like good film craft.
Okay.
So yeah, look, his daughter needed to either be like very reduced or very expanded. We kind of got this half pregnant thing with how they relate to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, again, it winds up being a shrug. That should not be a shrug. And through a variety of editorial choices, we made it that way. So yeah, again, you gave this a low 1, largely because of comparative analysis to everything else we've talked about. My scale doesn't shift for the year, so this is if I were to use your scale, this is a low 2.
Well, like I started off with, I think this did a good job of being exactly what it was meant to be, nothing more and nothing less. And that's a big part of why I gave it a 1. A low 1, but a 1. Like I said, this is the hot frosty of this year so far. Hot frosty.
Right, yeah. Hot frosty right next to the Cleveland Steamer.
Perfect. I'm glad you're with me. And with that said, here comes the money.
We're in the money. We're in the money.
Look, man, you do the line reading like Vince, I'm gonna make a Vince reference.
Get out here, you rapist. All right, speaking of which, it's been an interesting weekend. On a budget of $40 million, this thing has made $30.2 million, and it won the weekend. It beat the fuck out of Snow White, which we'll talk about.
No, it got $1 million more than Snow White, give or take.
Snow White also fucking took the hell on a cell fall.
No, that's at least artistic. Snow White took the Johnny Gargano fall off the War Games cage.
Okay, for the audience that doesn't watch wrestling, that whole last 30 seconds gave them a migraine. As of
You're welcome.
As of March 30th, 2025, a working man has grossed $15.2 million in the U.S. and Canada and $15 million in other worldwide territories for a total of $30.2. In the U.S. and Canada, a working man was released alongside The Woman in the Yard, The Penguin Lessons, and Death of a Unicorn, which I also saw this weekend, along with Black Bag. I saw 3 movies this weekend, and was projected to gross.
What did you think of Black Bag, by the way?
I will tell you in a moment. Was projected to gross 10 to 12 million from over 3,200 theaters in its opening weekend. The film made 5.6 million on its first day, including 1.1 from Thursday night previews. It went on to slightly overperform and debut 15.2 million, topping the box office. As for what I thought of Black Bag, I liked it. I wanted to like it more. I really, part of the reason why I pushed to do it on Thursday with Chris and Neil was I wanted, because I like Steven Soderbergh, I wanted to like it more than I did. And
you like the idea of Steven Soderbergh these days more than actually Steven Soderbergh's releases. What was the one he did that we reviewed that was like Zazie Beetz?
Kimmy. Yes.
Oh, what a terrible movie.
It's one of those where it's very adult. It's very mature, and I don't mean that in the pornographic way.
No, I'm with you.
But I think it's one of those where, like, I think the intent is this is supposed to be a movie for smart people. So as a smart person, I should like this more. Except I don't. Am I dumb? Like, that was how I walked out of that movie.
Fair enough.
And it's again, I'll talk more about this on Thursday. You know, Michael Fassbender is good. Cate Blanchett, to me, is the best part of this movie, but she's the best part of almost anything she's in, even garbage like Borderlands. Everybody else is fine, serviceable. They're doing what they're supposed to do. It's it's a movie that would have worked just as well as a stage play. Like, because other than the drone sequence, the drone attack sequence, there's not a whole lot to this movie except a lot of talking.
Okay.
The girl who played Amy Winehouse in her biopic Back in Black is in this. She's actually quite good. She's my second favorite. Her and Cate Blanchett were my 2 favorite parts of this entire movie, and mostly because the chick who plays Amy Winehouse just gives a really funny performance. She gives very amusing line readings. So yeah, Working Man was the #1 movie of the weekend. It knocked Snow White from 1 to 2.
Snow White with that 66% drop. Jeez.
I told you. I mean, I said 70, but close enough. The Chosen, Last Supper debuted at 3. Woman in the Yard debuted at 4. By the way, I don't know. I think I saw maybe 1 trailer for The Woman in the Yard. And Universal has not done a good job of marketing.
I saw several.
All right. I haven't seen shit on this. So I'm not surprised it debuted at 4. Death of a Unicorn, also not as good as I wanted it to be.
My brother saw it, said he largely enjoyed it, but man, the CGI is like PS2, PS3 era graphics.
Yeah, my kids both complained about the CGI in it. I'll talk again more about this Thursday. Death of a Unicorn could have had Triangle of Sadness level satire, and it doesn't even come close.
Triangle of Sadness isn't self-aware enough to be satire.
But
we had that fight.
We did. Princess Mononoke, the 4K restoration, debuted at number 6.
Good for it. It's a
Captain
good movie.
America, Brave New African American.
It's up from 3 to 7.
3 to 7. Black Bag 2 to 8. Mickey 17 5 to 9, and Novocaine 4 to 10. Off a cliff. The Penguin Lessons debuted at 11.
What is that? Do you know? I haven't seen anything about it.
I mean, I think I've heard the critically acclaimed guys talk about it, but I don't know anything about it. Alto Nights was just a giant bomb for Warner Brothers. They can't fucking buy it.
That's not a surprise at all.
No, that should have gone straight to Max, but they don't believe in doing that sort of thing anymore. That fell from 6 to 12. The Day the Earth Blew Up, which I don't know, who cares that it fell from 7 to 14. You know, it's hopefully Ketchup makes money with this. But they just bought Acme versus Coyote, so nerds like Alexis can rejoice.
Heel John Cena gets to abuse Tweety Bird on screen. It'll be great.
Yeah, depending on what it goes up against, maybe we'll end up reviewing it, all four of us, or I'll just have to let them two do it. This movie, I've seen the trailer for this now a few times, The Ballad of Wallace Island. I don't know how often I can get to the movies beyond what we're doing to see some of these smaller independent films, but I want to make it a point to see this one, The Ballad of Wallace Island. This is right up my alley.
I've heard nothing about this, so
well,
give me a pitch.
I've seen the trailer for it a few times. Basically, there's this lone guy on an island, and he invites this folk duo to come perform, and they are, of course, as all folk duos are, broken up. And I guess it's a man and a woman. They used to be in a relationship, but the woman has moved on both in profession and in love, and is with another person, and he's still, struggling with these sort of things. And they come back and they perform for this one guy, and he finds meaning in life again. It's my kind of movie. It's hopeful. That's hope. And it's about music and love and all the things that I like in this world that make me want to get up in the morning besides my children. Ash fell from 16 to 27. The Encampments debuted at 28. The Friend debuted at 29. Thank You Very Much debuted at 39. Janice, something called Janice Ian Breaking Silence debuted at 45. Grand Tour, 47. Holy cow, 49. Julia Keeps Quiet, which is my new favorite movie.
Isn't that just Julie?
Sorry, Julie Keeps Quiet. I'm so tired.
I'm pretty sure that's the name of the next party you're not going to.
It's 56. That was the weekend that was.
Worldwide, it is still a dumpster fire.
Gosh, Snow White's the number 3 movie in the world with 142 million.
I'm sad that it beat Dogman, and I never thought I'd say that.
Yeah, really.
On the plus side, it's not even going to sniff 200.
Captain America's sitting around 400 million. Snow White's at 142. Dogman's at 131. Bridget Jones' Mad About the Boy without a domestic release is 125. Mickey 17 is at 121. The Monkey is at 63. Den of Thieves Pantera 57. One of Them Days 51. And One of Them Days and Flight Risk, both January releases, by the way, are in the top 10 at 51 and 44 respectively.
Working Man debuts at number 15, overtaking Black Bag.
Movies doing less well than a movie that came out in January called Flight Risk are Companion, Wolfman, Hot Eyes, Working Man, Black Bag, Novocaine, Last Breath, Love Hurts, Deep 23. And that's about it as far as stuff we've talked about. So the only thing I want to mention, Death of a Unicorn debuted at 50 with 5 million. Yikes.
Big ol' 50.
So have you heard, and I can bring up an article if we need to have a reference point. Have you heard, this quarter has had more releases than, had, I think, the most movie releases since the pandemic, but has done less well than they did last year financially?
I believe it.
Yeah, we're not doing well this year. This was so a phrase that gets bandied around that I've heard in the podcasts that I listen to that are about the movie industry, were survive till 25, which was essentially kick a lot of stuff out of 2024, as we've talked about a bunch of times now, and retool it, rework it, and get it into 2025. And this was mostly because of the writer and the writer strike.
There was the writer strike, and then there was the other strike.
Yeah. So
I forget which one, but there were 2 of them.
Now we're in 2025, and they're shifting tunes from survive till 25 to the fix is 26. And
they're going to have another. I don't know what they're going to come up for 27, but they'll try to come up with something.
Oh, I don't want to retread over territory we've already talked about.
How is it these people are always just like climbing a ladder that's falling down a manhole?
Well, that's the thing. I think there's this hope that we're going to get back to 2019. And I think that's the only thing I want to talk about, because if we, I don't want to retread everything we've already said about this. So I'm being very careful with what I talk about. But I think I really want to hammer this point home, and I want you to join me in the hammering. Like, I'll stand on one side of the nail, you stand on the other side, and we'll keep doing this thing.
We can railroad spike this.
2019 was it. That's peak. And maybe it might have lasted a little longer had 2020 not happened, but it did happen. It was whatever. And we are now, the internet would have to collapse. Like, we would have to lose the internet to get back to 2019. That's how bad things have gotten. And
I
they're
think
never
even
going to
that
revert.
wouldn't help it.
Well, if you don't have internet, you don't have streaming, Robert.
I still don't think it would help that much.
You at this point, the world's only going one way. You know, we had this conversation last night on the Metal Hammer of Doom jukebox, where because the guy from Lordy had been complaining about digital music, and he was like, "I don't even open up my email. That's how fucking anti, doing the shit I am." And we were like, "Good for you, Mr. Lordy." But Jesse, who's Mr. AI, made a really great point. He was like, "How did we even know? Or how have we heard about Lordy?" And Robert heard about him through Fuse, but I got it through Spotify. Through Spotify suggestions or Pandora, one of the two. In either case, it was because of digital music.
I stumbled across them on YouTube because some of their music got used over like music video, like fan edit music videos I was watching.
My
I thought,
point,
but that sounds cool.
yeah. So my point is, like, we are now the marketplace wants digital. It doesn't want anything hard copy, and those that do are the nichest of the niche of your marketplace. So they don't even count. The vast majority of people want it on their mobile device, and that's it. Whether it's movies, books, music. I mean, I'm still one of the weirdo people who buys physical books, but it's mostly because it's hard for me to read off the screen.
I'm kind of with you. Like, I actually much prefer depends on what I'm reading. Like, I can read stuff online on my screen if I'm like reading a small short thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm gonna read a book, like, give me the book.
And there has to be. I think books are kind of maybe like the last bastion of people who want physical media, or we wouldn't have bookstores, because what we don't have? CD stores anymore. We still have comic book stores, but comic book stores also become like your local nerd hangout place, and they sell gaming stuff there.
The comic book shop and the game store kind of merged into one unit.
Right. So, as an offshoot of the bookstore, that's about it. Everything else, because we talked about this last night, like there's no more Tower Records, there's no more Sam Goody, there's no more VHS stores like you used to be, or DVD stores. There's no places to go to buy movies as such because people don't want them. The marketplace, it changed. And so why are we talking about this? Because as long as people are now conditioned to feel like the best option for them is digital, you're never going to get to 10 movies in the top 10 or more all making $1 billion. You're just not. There's no way to support that.
And, it doesn't help that prices seem to continue to go up and wages don't. And
somebody said if to take his 3 kids to the movies is a $300 day.
Okay, that's a bit much.
I was like, what the fuck are you doing?
But you know what? Okay, hang on. So let's run the math on this real fast. So assuming to get to $300 for 4 people, so 3 kids and an adult, right?
You definitely didn't go see a matinee, I'll tell you that much.
No, so you're prime time.
Mm-hmm.
So you're what? $10 a ticket?
Try 15. Let's pretend this guy took his kids to an IMAX showing. So
okay.
It's $15 a ticket.
Okay, so we're starting at 45.
Yep.
What's a large popcorn cost?
Oh, $15-20.
Okay, that's a bit much, but okay.
Well, again, what kind of popcorn are you getting, and with what? Let's put it this way: I can easily spend $100 at the movies.
Yeah.
How you got to $300? That's excessive.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, okay, I can absolutely buy that 4 people going to a primetime showing, buying popcorn and drinks for everyone. That can crack $100 pretty easily. I can absolutely believe that.
Yeah. Now,
300. Like, what are you going out to dinner afterwards? And we're factoring that in. Like, what's going on here?
He might be, and then absolutely, I can see it being 300. Like let's put it this way: I went to go see Death of a Unicorn. I saw a 1:30 show, so I saw a matinee. My girlfriend ended up ditching us; she had other stuff to do, so it was just me and my 2 kids. I have A-list, so I don't count. So, but I had to buy tickets for my 2 kids, and that because it was a matinee, that amounted to about $20. We didn't buy anything at the theater, but I took them to Olive Garden after, and that was another $100.
Well, yeah, again, so if you go to like the restaurant afterwards, you're like, okay, my entire night out with my kids ran me $300. That I can absolutely believe. But like just the movie portion of that being $300, that's a bit like that's irresponsible.
There's a way to get there though. So
sure.
So
get the personal pizza.
Man and 3 kids. Everyone gets their own popcorn. Everyone gets their own drink. Everyone got candy, and one person got a specialty item. Could have been like because one of the movies that Erica and I went to, she got donut holes. So, and I used to get I remember my kids each would get candy, and I would get 2 hot dogs. Like, you can't if everyone gets something and you keep doing multipliers of that. Yeah, I could kind of see how you got to 300, but that's because you were a crazy person and was like, it's our night out, but you can't do that every weekend. And that was obviously a special occasion. I go every weekend with my kids. They don't always get something. And if they do, like I said, I have points built up from A-list and stuff like that. The point of this is there's, the Survival 25 and the Fixin' 26 and, my best friend Levon in the year 2027, that I ate a pie in 28 and forgot
you gave up there
and I gave up the rhyming scheme in 29 is you think you're going to get to 10
things will be hang on. Here's what it's going to be. Things will be fine by 29.
But they won't.
Of course not, but that's what they're going to say.
And so people understand it's just I don't understand what you guys are talking about. You have 2 problems kind of converging into one massive depression of the theatrical exhibition marketplace. One, movies suck. See, 20 minutes ago, when I said the second best movie of the year was this one. It's when movies like anything else, if you lose the goodwill of the marketplace, it is hard to get it back. People are skeptical by nature. And
okay, let's rewind just a minute because I'm going to make the point. I'm going to agree with you and make your point. What does the MCU offer now? This was the box office king for a decade, right? What are they offering now? Nostalgia bait. That's all they've got. That's it. Come watch Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah. And if you're wondering about that, there's only 87 videos since they announced the Doomsday cast. And that has been, it's so funny. Imagine you're the people that work at Marvel right now. You're like, quick, get all this information about Doomsday out there. Get all, get teasers, get posters, get something. Get these people excited. The nerds are not with us. We've lost the nerds. Give nerds something to get excited about. They get excited about crossovers. They get excited about X-Men. Give them the fucking X-Men already. And then they
90-year-old Patrick Stewart.
And then they do the Doomsday, what we're talking about, so people understand or don't follow this stuff, because sometimes we're a little in the weeds. Over the weekend, there was an announcement of who was going to be the main Doomsday cast, which is Doomsday is the next Avengers movie, which is coming out next year.
Allegedly.
It was supposed to be the Kang Dynasty, but,
that didn't happen. Because we can't just recast.
The actor got himself in trouble, and they had to pivot. So now they're
doing... should have recast, but hey, here we are.
So now we're doing Doctor Doom, and they're doing their iteration of both versions of Secret Wars, which were comic book series that are decades apart. In any case, I don't want to explain too much of this stuff, but for those that don't know, they announced the cast of that movie, and they did so by showing empty director's chairs, and it was mostly the people that have been in the last 5 years worth of movies and some upcoming ones like Fantastic Four. There were no surprises except for there was a handful of Fox X-Men actors that are also going to be in it.
James Marsden, Channing Tatum. God, I hope he just dies.
Okay. Patrick Stewart.
Both Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
Who again are in their 80s.
Yeah, Kelsey Grammer, who was in The Stinger at the end of the Marvels.
Which nobody saw but us.
So if you're working for Marvel and you're working for Disney and this happens, the expectation is Hopefully this will make the nerds happy and they'll stop making endless videos screaming about how awful Disney and Marvel are. So they do this, and the result is the nerds all made movies about how boring and disappointed they are, and the point that you made a few minutes ago is all Marvel has is nostalgia. Which, if you work for Marvel and you saw any of that, how did you not throw yourself out a window? We have hit the point, and this is really the underlying factor in all this. We have hit the point with Marvel being kind of a microcosm of this problem. Nothing is going to make anybody happy. Everyone's so angry and so disappointed by 10 years. This is the word everyone else is using, and I hate it because it has no meaning anymore. But to get through my point, 10 years of woke movies, they are gone. They have left the relationship. They have left the house. They have moved in with another person.
We all did the John Cena, looked at the camera and said, we're breaking up with you.
Yeah. And you can do Baby Come Back. You can blame it all on me. I was Robert Downey Jr. and I just can't live without you. They don't care. They're done with this. They're doing something else now. They're all they're all fucking chasing their own tails is what they're doing. So when probably the most successful franchise in the last 20 years can't win back their fans, how do you expect to get to $2 billion is the number one movie of the year, and the remaining 9 in the top 10 all made over $1 billion? It's never going to happen.
Look, man, it's going to be a minor miracle if the new Avatar movie can hit the $2 billion mark.
And about the only one that does, because Avatar doesn't have shit all over it.
Yet.
Well, yeah, I'll say this and then we can move on. At least they've done with Avatar something they haven't done. Avatar is a very unique thing because they haven't oversaturated the market with it. They had one movie a zillion years ago, and then they did a movie a few years ago, and then we're getting another one. But it's not like, they've done a bunch of different Avatar movies in the middle that sucked.
Or a, streaming series that goes behind the scenes of some of the Space Marines or anything like that.
Right. They didn't treat Avatar like they've done with Marvel and Star Wars. It doesn't have I'll do it again, but I'm going to hate myself in the morning. It doesn't have the woke tag. Like Avatar is is an anomaly that largely avoided every single pitfall everything else threw themselves into, like Daffy Duck in Robin Hood.
Well, it helps that, like you said, James Cameron was content to go like, you know what? Let's not. Like, I'm going to work on stuff. There's a bunch of technology that has to advance. And while his views probably align with a lot of that stuff for a variety of reasons, he never made a movie that got really, like you said, that really got a lot of the blowback from having the girl boss or neutering the male lead or, any of these other things that just alienated the audience. And I'll throw the caveat once again, yet. Watch this one, just drive face first into all of them, because if someone's going to do it bigger and better, it's got to be Cameron.
I would like to think he's paying attention and has learned from people. Look, if there's anything to be done now that Snow White has done what it's done, everyone else has got to have wisened up at this point. There's nobody that currently looking at Snow White and going more of the same. There's no possible way.
You'd like to think that, wouldn't you?
Well, if Snow White had happened 5 years ago, I would not say that. But it's been 5 years of all of that stuff.
And Snow White does, let me phrase it this way. I sincerely hope that turkey bomb is the culmination of all of this and not just another notch on the ladder.
The last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm done. I'm going to move on to the next thing. Because you brought up Marvel, and I feel the need to put an exclamation point on this. You said the only thing they've got is nostalgia. They have one other thing. That this is going to end. That they got to Endgame, and everyone was like, we're done now, right? We've told the story that needed telling. They're like, no. We have a streaming service we have to feed to. And we have more movies we're going to do. And we have stories forever. And none of it worked out. And if you look at Doomsday and Secret Wars as the tacit admission that this thing is almost dead. So let's try to. I mean, at this point, we've killed the pilot, some of the passengers. There's a hole in the plane. If we can get this thing on the fucking ground, a la Snakes on a Plane, and land it without killing any more people, we'll call that a success and walk away quietly, like fucking Bill Bixby at the end of the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, most of the chatter around this, and again, this is rumor and innuendo and whatnot, that Secret Wars is going to be a non-trivial reset of the entire godforsaken behemoth at this point.
It's a great way to just end the fucking thing, and then they can start over a few years later. Look, I was the one that said, honestly, they should just kill everything at Lucasfilm, give it a few years off, and start all over again, brand new and exciting. Recast Han, recast Leia, recast Luke, just start all over again. With new young actors. Same thing with Marvel. The only way to save it is to kill it in its current form and wait a few years and start all over again. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
I don't think that. Here's the problem, though. I don't think that would save it. I mean,
well, I'll go you one better. Like I said, it's never gonna get any better than it was in 2019, and you can't recreate the Beatles. Shut up, Robert. So you're not going to recreate the MCU 2010 to 2020. You're just not.
I agree with you. Like that's one of those things that just will probably never really be duplicated for a variety of reasons.
Nope. The world is a much different place than it was in 2010. And with that said, their critical review.
Are you ready? No! I said, are you ready?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
That's about right.
That's about right.
So the tomato meter has it at 49%, which is not a surprise at all.
It's going to go lower when we get to top critics.
And then the audience meter is at 89%, which is also no surprise.
Yeah, 41.
So top critics is 41, all critics is 49. Verified audience is 89. Watch all audience be 100%. 84. The other went in the other direction. How about
either way? It's about right.
Yeah, this is more of a crowd pleaser than it is a critical darling.
Yeah.
And the AI writes, what does the AI say?
It doesn't. There's no actual synopsis.
Oh, well, good golly, Miss Molly. All right, moving on.
The AI took this one off.
The AI said no, thank you. Jason Nugent of Empire Magazine, top critic. Like a parody of a Jason Statham film without any of the joy that might imply. This working man just doesn't work. Dirty.
It's a little harsh. I mean, I was not a big fan of this, but that's a little harsh.
Sarah Michelle Fetters of MovieFreak.com, top critic, one of my favorite punching bags. A working man is a sleazy waste of time. All right, in what way was this sleazy, madam?
I get kind of what she's trying to say there, but this was like improper use of a thesaurus.
Yeah. The future ex-Mrs. Robert Winfrey, Carla Hay of Culture Mix. I'm developing a theme now. A working man starts off as a fairly thrilling vigilante action movie, but it becomes a soulless checklist of unrealistic murders. Ma'am, have you never seen a movie before?
Hang on.
Unlike the campiness of The Beekeeper, a working man takes itself too seriously. Any attempted comedy falls flat.
I will mention this. I do think she's right that the moments of levity or whatnot that are supposed to be in here, they don't work.
Mm-hmm. Todd Jorgensen of Cinemalog. Every character and scenario comes right off the assembly line.
Weak review, sir.
Frank Switek of One Guy's Opinion. Near the close of A Working Man, Jenny survives the wreckage of the place where she'd been held captive and defiantly raises two middle fingers. Perceptive viewers may feel the gesture is actually directed at the filmmakers by the filmmakers at them.
You could tell me that, and I would believe you, believe it or not.
All right. Amy Nicholson, this week of Los Angeles Times top critic. Ayer knows what his audience wants, and he's willing to give it to them. He's a working man, too. Oh, my God. At least his product is custom crafted.
No, it's not.
That was
Of
torture.
all the David Ayer movies, this is a very paint by numbers David Ayer kind of thing in a lot of ways.
That review was more tortured than the gal in the movie.
True.
Travis Hobson, my other favorite punching bag of punch-drunk critics. It's an old action flick that would have been right at home in the 1987, a VHS tape plucked from the Errol storage shelf and watched late on a Friday night.
That's accurate.
Let's see here. Richard Krause of The Richard Krause. Jason Statham is back with A Working Man, which feels like a remake of all his other movies. Despite the sense of deja vu I had while watching it, I liked it when Statham was punching people. I like it less when he wasn't. It's fair.
Yeah, that's not an unfair way to look at this movie.
Kane Nobles Davies of Film Inc. Australia. A workman-like action flick, Derheap.
Did that score say 12 out of 10?
I didn't look.
Let it go. You don't have to go back and double check that.
I'm not. I'm looking to see who I missed when this thing went all the way to the bottom. I can almost guarantee if I can find either of our friends on here, they did not like this movie. This doesn't seem like a William Bibiani or a Whitney Seibold movie.
This does seem very much like a Kevin Carr flick, though.
Maybe if he had seen it, because it ain't here.
He did not publish a review for this, would be my guess.
Derek Smith of Slant Magazine, top critic. David Ayer's film proceeds as an unambiguous celebration of its hero's vigilantism.
Of all the movies you might want to try and take up the cause of, like, let's have a serious discussion about vigilantism, this ain't it, buddy.
All right. Well, folks, that is our review of A Working Man.
Working.
Call him the Working Man. Are you a Rush fan?
You know what you should have done? Not saying should have. Another way you could have gone.
Okay.
Any Men at Work song.
Okay. Did they do a Land Down Under? Is that them? Men at Work?
Probably.
Okay. Because I know Men Without Hats is the safety dance, and now I'm off on a tangent.
Well, and they should wear hats.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I would say Land Down Under is Men at Work, if I remember correctly. I have to look it up now.
Men at Work comes to my mind every so often because of that one scene in the original Footloose where they play with band names.
Did you ever see the actual Men at Work movie?
No.
Okay, it's funny.
Now,
Anyway.
that sequence goes something like Kevin Bacon asks, not Sean Penn, Chris Penn. So you ever see Men at Work? No, what do they do?
Okay, nice.
Okay, how about the police? How about the police? You heard them? No, but I've seen them. What, at a concert? No, behind you.
All right, we're going to switch places. You do your plugs first, and I'm going to do my plugs.
Oh, boy, Mark's going to run off. All right. I cover mixed martial arts and professional wrestling over at 411mania.com. I covered UFC. I did not cover live UFC on ESPN 64 from this last Saturday. I was busy for a giant chunk of it, but I did. There was a full report up in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com, so go give that a read if you're so inclined. Let's see. This week will be UFC on ESPN 65. They are broadcasting warehouse fights. There's a few decent fights on that card for what it's worth. Nothing exceptional though. So I will be covering that. Friday, WWE SmackDown. Did not care for this last episode, I can tell you that much. All the energy seems to have been going into promoting WrestleMania on Raw, and SmackDown is getting the short end of the stick. We'll see if they change that up this week, but I kind of doubt it. Also on Sunday, I will be covering AEW Dynasty is their next event. Yeah, April 6th, I will be covering Dynasty, so tune in. If you're so inclined, I'll figure out whatever they're doing over there. I think that one's main evented by John Moxley and Swerve Strickland for the AEW World title. It can't be worse than Moxley and Cope. I'll just throw that out there. Boy, did that match suck out loud. So I'll be covering that. And yeah. Again, I also host the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. If you want my musings on the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. This last week, I did a review, did a preview, talked about Cain Velasquez finally being sentenced for his low-key rampage, we'll call it.
He was a working man.
No.
Okay.
I also talked a little bit about the UFC's inability to recruit talent, yet again, because that's becoming a bit of a theme for them over the last little bit.
Did people just give up doing MMA, or are they going elsewhere?
They're just not. I can't say I can't say entirely people have given up on MMA. That's a bit much. But they are not recruiting the talent that they used to. Their whole mentality seems to be, we do a season of Tough every now and then, despite the fact that nobody cares for it or about it, but some streamer will pay too much for it. We have our Puppy Mill, that is the Dana White Contender Series. And we do the Road to UFC event for like Southeast Asia and India. And do that. And
but
they're
not rating the regionals anymore like they used to.
Here's how you get into the UFC these days. You go through one of those three things that I mentioned, or you accept a very short notice fight. That's it.
Is the regional MMA scene what it used to be back when I was, paying attention
Oh,
to
heavens,
these sort of
no.
things? Okay.
First of all, there is no close competitor to the UFC anymore.
That much I knew.
But this kind of got brought up this last week because a fairly famous and decorated kickboxer fought on the Contender Series, won, and then turned down the contract.
To do what? To do what, though?
Kickbox again. Like, he's back in glory.
Okay.
But, this guy was the last guy in kickboxing that beat Alex Pereira. He is a more decorated kickboxer than either Pereira or Israel Adesanya.
Using any popularity you might garner from being as part of in the UFC circle to go back and get more money out of glory is fucking awesome.
He's not getting more money than he was before from glory, I don't think.
Oh, he's not? Then why do any of this?
To try, look, here's what happened. Again, won on the Contender Series. They present you a bog standard contract for winning on the Contender Series. It goes something like this. Here's a 6-fight deal. Your first fight is 12-12. In fact, your first 4 fights are probably 12-12. If you win all of them, you'll get to 20-20. And then after 6 fights, which amounts to like a year and a half or 2 years, we renegotiate. That's what they do. And this world champion, highly decorated kickboxer looked at that and went, can we talk numbers a little bit? And the UFC said, take it or walk. And he walked. And more people who might come into the MMA space are just looking at it and going, no. This is how many... You don't watch enough MMA for me to really kind of drive this point home, but when you were, watching regularly, even when you weren't covering it, there was a non-trivial pipeline from good collegiate wrestlers who weren't quite good enough to be like the world class, but were D1 All-Americans. They'd go into MMA if they wanted to continue their athletic pursuits. They viewed that as a viable path. They don't anymore. You don't have that collegiate wrestler.
Where are they going? They going to the WWE?
Or giving up on athletics.
Okay.
Yeah, dude.
Here's my only counter to this, and you're probably going to eat this up because you're more involved in this than I am. But I do remember the salad days of Strikeforce, and and when where the UFC was buying up Strikeforce and buying up this and buying up that, and really establishing itself as the go-to place in the UFC.
Establishing themselves as a monopoly is the word you're looking for.
Yes. They did bring in guys and brought in guys for exorbitant contracts because their names had value, and they came into the UFC And if they didn't outright bomb out, they definitely stumbled around. And did some of them right the ship? Sure. Were they worth the contracts that they were given? There's an argument to be made of no. And so now I think the UFC is in a place of going, one, we've tried this before. It rarely works in our favor. Two, where we kind of like the WWE now with house shows, we're like, we don't need to do these anymore. We're getting enough money and rights. Where the UFC is like, well, we're getting enough money in the deals that we're making. We don't need to pay exorbitant contracts for named stars. The brand is the star, not the people.
Yeah,
And I'm saying I'm just being their defense attorney.
I'm aware. Hang on, let me counter two things on that.
Mm-hmm.
One, the acquisition of talent from Pride or Strikeforce or the WEC was a giant boon to the UFC. Pretending otherwise is just ahistorical nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Major champions and draws came out of those acquisitions.
Agreed.
Daniel Cormier came from Strikeforce. Luke Rockhold came from Strikeforce.
Yes.
Fabricio Verdum came back from Strikeforce.
Yes. Alistair Overeem came back from Strikeforce. I remember, Robert.
That's not just for you. That's for everybody.
Okay.
So that doesn't exist anymore. And guys like Artem Vakutov, this guy we're talking about, or Saladin Parnasse, or Cedric Doumbé, who are pretty big regional stars. I mean, Parnasse is a two-weight world champion in KSW, which is a very, very legitimate regional promotion out of Poland. In fact, allow me to tell you your next favorite fight, Mark.
I've actually watched a bunch of KSW.
Yeah, they're of course, because they do stuff like Mariusz Pudzianowski and versus Eddie Hall, which is what they announced recently.
Hot dog. That's
but
right
yeah, he's a two-weight world champion in KSW going for 3. It's ridiculous. He's good. Cedric Doumbé is like the only draw the PFL has in Europe because it's a big deal in France. He's a pretty good fighter. And his thing to the UFC was, could you give me $100K to fight? And they said, no, pound sand. This is a multi-billion-dollar organization.
I guess they figure they can, but they'll be a multi-billion-dollar organization without name draws. Is my point. The WWE a long time ago gave up on individual personalities as such and said the brand is the thing, and we just rotate people in and out of here. I'm guessing the UFC took the same thing. And if and yes, there are individual stars in a lot of other sports, but if you would ask people who are casually following anything, could they name a basketball player besides maybe LeBron James? The answer would be no, but they can name the fucking Lakers.
Well, that's because they have teams, and the teams are actually competitive with each other. And that's why the NBA works the way it does. But that's a whole other thing.
Said that about football or about baseball again.
Okay, but hang on. 2 other things about this, though.
Mm-hmm.
1, do you know what the average salary for a main roster guy is in the WWE?
How do we not just do a show where we just talk?
I don't know, but serious question. Like, what's the lowest that you make as a main roster guy in WWE?
I don't know.
$290,000 a year before merch.
All right, so and after this, we're done with this topic. This is supposed to be plugs. So turn this around for me. Why is the UFC coming from the standpoint of view of take it or leave it, pound sand? We're not paying exorbitant contracts.
Because where else do you go?
But isn't that what I said?
Hang on. You want to know why? Here's the real problem that they're going to run into, and I mean this.
Mm-hmm.
The UFC right now is coasting on ESPN, paying them more than they're worth to them. And a combination of here's a bunch of guys fighting in a warehouse in front of 5 drunk people when they're at the UFC Apex, or the circus came to town, pay us $1,000, pay us at least $1,000 for nosebleed seats.
Did you see
this
Orlando?
Is not sustainable.
Did you see Orlando put in I think it's like a $32 billion bid or some crazy thing to host WrestleMania, to host wrestling and the UFC?
Yeah, because this is what TKO does.
Mm-hmm. But again, it does support the argument of who gives a fuck. We will put zombies on camera because it doesn't seem to matter. It's still drawing these giant paychecks from hither and yon.
Well, this is the other thing that needs to be understood about the WWE and the UFC. Like, the consumer, like the fan, is about the third most important person to them.
Right.
There's whoever pays for their TV rights. There's whatever money they can extort from the local government to come there in the first place. And then there's maybe the people who might show up.
So anyway, as much as fun as I enjoyed doing this with you, last week there was a sessions. We reviewed Snow White. Ugh. I did just a
The next
dandy.
sessions will be a therapy sessions for the after the Snow White review.
I did just a dandy triple feature with Shay Tate. We did Mean Girls the musical, Waitress the musical, and Legally Blonde the musical, and I had this the loveliest time. What a wonderful podcast! Gosh, I enjoyed that. She was a darling, very knowledgeable. Loved every minute of that podcast. Can't wait to do another one with her. Yesterday,
You know, I appreciate that I can tell when you're not being sarcastic.
Last night was a Metal Hammer of Doom jukebox. Mick was not able to make it, but just us boys there. Myself, Jesse, and Robert. We did the Lacuna Coil, and we had a similar discussion to the one we had tonight about digital music and whatnot. There were no other shows in their normal time slots, but this Thursday I will be on Movies That Don't Suck and Some That Do, talking Death of a Unicorn and Black Bag, in theory, I believe is what was decided. Friday night, we were supposed to do St. Louis Anarchy, but apparently there's no replay that we can watch, so we switched gears. Now we're doing House of Glory, City of Dreams, featuring the former Sasha Banks, now known as Mercedes Montez or something like that.
Oh, why do you hurt me?
Mercedes something or other.
Just call her the female Hulk Hogan. Let's move on.
Mary Mercedes.
It's Mercedes Money, but the last one is Mone with an accent over the E.
Terrific.
She's the worst.
I understand. So that's what we're doing.
She's not Poochie, but she's almost the worst.
Next week on Damn You Hollywood, we will be doing Minecraft. But prior to that, we will be doing another sessions. This one is, I told Alexis about this, we're going to do a rap song called The Plugs That Pay Me, based on Naughty by Nature's Here Comes the Money. Teach you to fucking come on my podcast.
You are so bitter about people you invited to come on the show being on the show.
Hang on. I invited her to come on Long Road to Ruin and Source Material. I never once invited her to come on Damn You Hollywood.
You know this is a black hole. I keep telling you this, and then you invite people into the black hole. They get stuck in the gravity.
She did this to herself. One, because of the whole you don't pay me enough for this, and it's you volunteered to be here, and I asked her to quit doing that, and she never did because she's who she is. So, but the other thing was, she always asked to come on Damn You Hollywood. She always asked, and then was then does it you? Oh, why am I here? I don't understand. And it's all right.
At least I do it as an affectation for the purposes of performance. I understand why I'm here and how I got here. I'm not under any illusions about this.
Yes. Well, she likes to pretend that I was always asking her to be on Damn You Hollywood. It's no, sister, that is not how this goes. And then would demand, and then would make jokes about not being paid for the thing I didn't ask her to be on to begin with. So yeah, she was be dealt a death blow with rap music.
Well, if you're gonna go out, that's a bad way to go out. So I understand your hatred.
Wu-Tang forever. All right. With that said,
rap is crap, Mark, and we all know it.
Thank you, Kurt Hennig. For
his greatest gift to us was that song.
For the working man, Robert Winfrey, I am the American dream. Be well, be safe, and behave.